The scrutiny Gospels are really incredible. This is obviously a choice from the ancient church in her wisdom that has continued with us because it was such a good choice. During the scrutinies, we're focused on catechumens. And in the church today, we treat catechumens and candidates very differently. Candidates are assumed to have already been brought into Christ, already been baptized, already know how to live as a Christian. But catechumens are assumed to be absolute and total pagans, just absolutely apart from God. They're laughing, it's okay. And the idea from the ancient church communicated to today is that they are brought slowly, step by step, closer into Christ. That the whole process of their catechumenate was this process of learning to be and live as a Christian. There is an aspect of knowledge, to be sure, but it's more an aspect of living. How do you live as a Christian? What does that look like? Being brought step by step closer to the heart of the Lord. And then this period of Lent, for those who are going to be baptized at Easter, is the period of immediate preparation, of purification and enlightenment. And these three Gospels, the third, fourth, and fifth Sunday of Lent, they come from the Gospel of John, and we do entire chapters of the Gospel. They're so long, because the way John works is he gives us a whole dialogue, very, very similar to Socratic dialogues, where there is an exchange, there's a back and forth. Somebody says something, somebody replies, there's a misunderstanding, through that misunderstanding a clarification comes about, and through this dialogue we have profound theology. But what's amazing about these Johannine dialogues is it's not to serve the purpose of philosophy like the Socratic dialogues, but it's to show the process by which the Lord invites the human heart to salvation. Last week we had the Gospel of the woman at the well, and there's this whole dialogue where Jesus is slowly drawing her into faith. She who began extremely skeptical and not interested ends as an apostle to her Samaritan village. Today, we have this gospel of the man born blind. And again, St. John is masterful in the way he presents these dialogues that he remembers the Lord having, these things that he remembers because John walked with the Lord for his entire public ministry. And I'm going to take you through those stages so that you can recognize in yourselves, and so that our catechumens can recognize in themselves, how the Lord has brought you closer to his heart. And today's gospel is focused specifically on how we grow in persecution. So the first gospel with the woman at the well, how we grow in sin, from sin to holiness. Next week's gospel, the raising of Lazarus, how we grow into resurrection through the Lord, how he brings us toward resurrection. But today, how do we grow in persecution? Because the Lord promises his followers persecution. There's a story in the Gospels where St. Peter says, Lord, we have given up everything to follow you. We've given up houses and family and friends and money. And Jesus says, absolutely. And you're going to get all of that back with persecutions in this life and the life to come. He promises his followers persecutions. You, as a Christian, will be persecuted by the world because you are a threat to the power structure of the world. Jesus, when he dies on the cross and he rises from the dead, he says that the greatest enemy, the greatest power in this world, death, is now conquered. You, as Christians, now live for something higher, something transcendent, something greater. You are living for the next world, not this world, meaning that no power on earth has power over you. And those who wish to preserve their power and fight for their power on this earth are threatened by you because you undercut that power. Because no matter what they do, they cannot harm you because you do not even fear death. Every Christian will suffer persecution, and it's through the persecutions, often, that we will grow in faith. What does it look like for the man born blind? Well, he begins by just receiving a miracle out of nowhere. He is aware that Jesus is doing this, right? He can hear, he just can't see. He knows that this is happening. He knows that it's this prophet named Jesus. He has no idea what Jesus looks like because he never sees Jesus' face. He's cured after he washes, and he's washing alone in the pool. He has no idea. But out of nowhere, God just strikes him. And I would suggest to you that many of our catechumens have that kind of experience. Out of nowhere, God just got their attention. And many of you might very well have had that experience. Even if you are baptized Catholic, there's a deepening of faith that happens in your youth or young adulthood, usually, sometimes in your adulthood. God just gets your attention. Something happens. And suddenly you wake up and you say, the scales are gone, or the depression is gone, or I finally have something to live for, or, oh, this thing that I was worried about, I'm suddenly, whatever reason, I'm not worried about it anymore. Somehow God has healed me. And a lot of times He heals things that have been with us from the beginning. He's walking with us all the time, and He's looking for that opportunity to encounter us and to heal us. And a lot of times we have no idea what happens. There's another story in the Gospel of John, I think we'll hear it this year, where there's a guy waiting by a pool. He's been crippled for decades, and the idea is that if he gets to the pool, he can be healed. And Jesus comes up and asks, do you want to be healed? And the guy says, well, it's hard for me to get to the pool, and I'm crippled. And the Lord doesn't call him out on it, but I do when I preach that homily. He didn't answer the question. The question was, do you want to be healed? And the guy is so hardened of heart, he doesn't even know whether he wants to be healed. Sometimes we get this miracle from God, and we're not even sure if we want it. This guy at the pool, he eventually turns Jesus into the authorities so that Jesus will be persecuted. He's like, well, I didn't necessarily want to be healed, and this guy, you're right, here's Jesus, right? But our gospel today, he acts differently, because he's open to what happens. He's healed of his blindness. This is what he's been praying for, and he's so thankful, and he knows all thankfulness has to go to God. Now, this guy could have been resentful in his heart. He could have been resentful that he was born blind. He could have gotten to the point where he didn't want anything to do with God. And that at this moment of healing, he still turned away from the Lord. But that's not what happens. He remained faithful to God even in his suffering. When God finally found a way to heal him, he is thankful. What happens next? Well, he's called in by his neighbors, and the neighbors are like, who is this guy? Is this really the guy? How does this happen? And the guy's like, yeah, it's me. And this guy named Jesus healed me. And the neighbors are like, where is Jesus? And the guy's like, well, I have no idea. Like, I'm not his friend. I didn't see him. I don't know what he even looks like. All right, the first persecution is people saying you're different. And this will happen a lot when we try to live our faith very strongly. When we try to say, I'm going to live differently. I'm not going to curse anymore. I'm not going to enter into gossip. I'm not going to speak about impure things. I'm going to try to respect the people around me. If we haven't been doing that, our friends expect us to act in that sinful way, and we try to move away from sin, what happens? You've changed. You're different. What's this? Why are you doing this? I don't like being with you anymore. Okay, that's persecution. That's hard. They don't even recognize you anymore. And then they're like, how can you explain this? What do you do? How justify yourself? And you're like, I don't know how to justify myself. I just know that this is something that I'm supposed to do. It's something that I'm being called to do. I don't know where Jesus is. I just know that this is the path that I'm on. And it's hard and it's isolating. You feel very alone in that moment. What's the next persecution? Well, the man born blind is brought to the Pharisees. And the Pharisees are a complicated set of figures in the Gospels because, on the one hand, they are very faithful to the law. They are very faithful to what God asked them to do. But, possibly unbeknownst to them, they have become addicted to the power of this world. And Jesus becomes a threat to them. Because the Pharisaical power is built on their specific interpretation of the law. Jesus challenges their interpretation of the law, which is to say, healing somebody on the Sabbath doesn't count as a violation of the Sabbath. But because they're so entrenched in their power and their view, they are not open to the new things that God wishes to do with them. So on the one hand, they are very faithful, but on the other hand, their faithfulness has become corrupted. So the Pharisees here are trying to enforce Jewish law. And they're saying, well, obviously Jesus can't be a good man because he made clay on the Sabbath. Well, look, Jesus spit on the ground, mixed it together, made some clay. Is that really working on the Sabbath? Jesus would argue healing on the Sabbath is not a violation. But for them, that's a form of making a well, right? It's a form of creating bricks on the Sabbath. And so, any little thing is a slippery slope to a true violation of the Sabbath. And they had begun to persecute things that were not actual sins, but that reminded them or could possibly lead to sins. It's a problem. So the Pharisees persecute this guy, and they say, hey, obviously something is wrong here. Because Jesus must be a sinner. If he's making clay on the Sabbath, he's clearly a sinner. And the man born blind, justify it. And so he's honest about what God did. He made clay, he put it on my eyes. That's his first response. And that's true for all of us as well. Our first response when people persecute us or challenge us or say, how can you justify what you're doing? Our first response is, well, this is just what happened to me. I felt healed, or I found reconciliation, or God gave me this moment or this thing, or I managed to find healing with my father or my mother. Factual statement, this is just what happened. The man born blind doesn't justify it. He doesn't say anything else. It's just, this is what happened. But the people around him reject it. And a lot of times what that's going to look like for us today is people who think they know Christianity, but they reject Christianity. The thing that drives me up a wall is when people say, well, I went to Catholic school, and so I can say this is what the church should do. And I'm like, that doesn't give you any justification for telling me how the church should change, right? The church ministered to you. You don't necessarily have power over us here. But what's happening is the Pharisees and everybody around us, what they're saying is, look, I know Christianity. I know that what you're going to is wrong. The Pharisees are saying, we know Jesus is a sinner because he made clay on the Sabbath. So whatever you're doing with this conversion, this change of life, this is terrible because Christianity is terrible because I know Christianity and Christianity is terrible. Christianity hurt me, therefore it's going to hurt you. You're going to get that persecution all the time. People who think that the salvation of their souls is found anywhere except Jesus. People who look to the Eastern religions, they look to yoga, or they look to Buddhism, or they look to self-help books, or they look to crystals, or whatever other crazy thing they want to do. Because they were raised Christian, they rejected that, and of course salvation cannot be found in Christ. Jesus, as the Pharisees say, Jesus is a sinner, so clearly something else must be happening. But then you're going to be pushed more and more. Justify it, justify it. They say, how can a sinful man do such signs? They'll tell you, how can Christianity save you? If Christianity is this horrible, we know it's horrible, how can it be horrible? Justify it. And at that point, that's where the Christian is forced to go beyond facts and to talk about their life. They say, what do you have to say about Jesus? And the man born blind says, well, he's a prophet. Now, he doesn't go so far as to say that he's God. He doesn't go so far as to say what he says later in the gospel. He just says, look, this is my first take. I'm still figuring this out, but I think he's a prophet. And you're going to have to justify your faith. And you're going to have to say, look, I think there's power here. I think maybe you're misunderstanding what's going on with Christianity. I think you don't understand the power of the faith. And you're going to have to say, look, I think there's something true in Catholicism. Regardless of the sins that you might name, I think there's something true here. And you'll be called upon to say that. Then the man's parents are brought in. And they're afraid. They're afraid. Because they know that they're going to be persecuted. They know that these folks, these very popular, powerful people, are arrayed against Jesus. And so they don't want to be involved. And the next persecution you're going to experience, after having all of your friends say that you're different, after having people who are influential or people in power say that you're making a wrong choice, Christianity is going to disappoint you, the next thing you're going to experience is betrayal. If you really, really dive into Jesus, if you give your life to the Lord, at some point, even the people that you think are your allies are going to leave you out to dry. And again, I don't blame them. I preach the same gospel to them as I do to you. I welcome them into the church, and I would invite them to reconcile with God. But there are a lot of people who are given the gift of faith as young people who are not necessarily opposed to the faith, but will absolutely never defend it in public because it brings persecutions. And there are people that you're hoping would back you up if you have to say something unpopular or if you have to defend and justify your Catholic faith. And they will not be there for you. They will not be with you in the trenches. And that is a different kind of persecution. Because they didn't say anything against you, but they kind of left you alone. And again, you're going to feel alone. And you're going to feel abandoned. And that's going to be a very, very hard day. And imagine this man born blind, his own parents knew that if they spoke up, they were going to be kicked out of the synagogue. And rather than be kicked out of the synagogue with their son, they said, well, he's got to live with the consequences of his own actions. Right? If he wants to give his life to Jesus, if he wants to follow this very unpopular guy, that's on him. His own parents. His own parents. It's a hard thing to experience. And the Christian, this is why it's a scrutiny, and this is why we're preaching to our catechumens, the Christian has to prepare for that before they make the commitment. If you're going to be baptized, you have to be willing to defend Jesus alone. You have to be willing to follow him because you believe in him personally. That is a necessary component of baptism. Now, our hope is that we would never have to do that. Our hope is that every member of this church and all of the churches in Whatcom County would be with you in persecution. But we know, based on the history of the church, that when persecution comes, grain is sifted in a sieve. You have to be prepared to stand on your own if it comes to that. Finally, how does this go? Well, his parents abandon him. He's standing alone before the Pharisees, and he could easily walk it back. And we see that in other Johannine Gospels, like the guy at the pool. Walks it back. Well, I said he's a prophet, but I don't know what kind of prophet. Oh, I don't know, whatever else. But this guy, through persecution, finally having to stand alone, has to make a choice, a truly existential choice. Am I going to defend the Lord or not? And if he's going to defend the Lord, at some point he goes all in. And once you go all in, it becomes easy. Once you're like, nothing can hurt me, no persecution can hurt me, I've already lost my friends, I've already lost the culture, I've already lost even my parents. All right, let's do this thing. And he goes at it with the Pharisees. And it is fascinating to see. He gets snarky. I already told you what happened. You want to hear it again because you're so excited about Jesus that you want to be his disciple as well? That's wonderful. Let me tell you. That requires confidence. That shows that this man, in the course of maybe a day or two, over the course of these conversations, he's given his life to Jesus. And now he's just deeply confident in the Lord. He doesn't care about these persecutions. He cares about the truth. He cares about what happened. He cares about paying back the gift that God has done for him. Because again, remember, this started with his healing. He was a blind man, and now he's not blind, he can see. Is he going to betray God like he himself has been abandoned and betrayed? Is he going to turn around on the Lord and walk away from the one who healed him? No. He is dedicated to the truth. He has been transformed by the Lord. And so now he says, absolutely, let's be Jesus' disciples. And he says everything that he knows is going to get him kicked out of the synagogue. But he's able to do so with confidence, with snark, because he trusts the Lord. What else is he going to do? I have this moment all the time, both with my faith and with my work as a priest, where there's something really hard that I have to say to somebody, or something really hard that I have to do, or some call that God has put into my life for somebody who's in front of me that might cost me something, time or vulnerability or money. And I'll resist it, but then it's very clear from the Lord and very clear from my conscience. What, are you going to turn away? Are you going to turn away from the Lord? Are you going to turn away from the church? And once that question is asked, the answer is always no. I am not going to turn away. And because I'm not going to turn away, then I can approach the thing with confidence. Because what else am I going to do? What else is this going to do? Guy going to do? He's going to walk away? No. So he defends himself. He defends Jesus. And by the end of it, he is saying not just that he's a prophet. That's a reasonable statement, but it's still a little reserved. Now he's saying, this guy is from God. This guy is obviously from God. You cannot heal a man born blind if you are not from God. And I can't say whether he's a sinner or not. He's basically like, all right, you guys have your own business as the religious authorities. Figure it out for yourselves. But all I know is that he healed me. He's clearly from God. And if you can't see that, again, a little bit of snark, it's amazing that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes. Right? The blind man is saying, you guys are obviously blind because you have no idea what's going on here. A lot of confidence. Because again, what's he going to do? Turn away from the Lord? No. I hope that we can have that confidence. We can make that commitment to say, I'm Catholic. I have given my life to Jesus. I am going to do nothing else. And so when we're faced with a hard question or a persecution or a difficult situation, we can just say, I've already made my choice. I made my choice last year, or 20 years ago, or 60 years ago. That choice is still operative today. What am I going to do? Make a different choice? No. What's the result? What happens at the end? Because this man, without even seeing Jesus, has lived such an incredible faith already, given his life to Jesus already, Jesus is able to appear to him and to say, do you believe in the Son of Man? Yes. Show me who he is. I am he. And he worships. This man has a personal, face-to-face, one-on-one encounter with the Lord. Because he's already given his life to Jesus. And so Jesus is able to freely enter his life. If we want that kind of encounter with the Lord, sometimes we have to go all the way out in faith before it's possible. If we have these reservations, well, I'll follow the Lord except for this or that or the other thing, then it's hard for us to receive the fullness of the Lord and his countenance. It's hard for him to look upon us fully and for us to receive that. Make a commitment. Stick with him. And the Lord will find a way through your commitment to be present to you. Final component of this. Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, surely we are not also blind, are we? And Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying we see, so your sin remains. Be attentive. Be attentive to the ways in which you need the Lord. Be attentive to the ways in which you've not stood up in the face of persecution, or the ways in which you've walked away from the faith. Be attentive to the ways in which you might have closed your heart to the things God wants to do for and with you. And if you are attentive to those things, they are not a barrier. Right? If you said that you were blind, you would be without sin. If you go to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm sinful, that is exactly what he needs to hear to heal you from that sin. Our catechumens today are doing a scrutiny, which is a public recognition of the fact that they are sinners. Because by doing so, it allows them to receive the forgiveness of God. And the same is true even for us who are baptized. We have to say, I'm a sinner. Lord, I'm a sinner. I know that I'm a sinner. I know that I've fallen short. And the second you do that, your sin, gone. You have to go to a confession with the priest, but that contrition, 95% of it, right? Gone. Yeah, I'm blind, but that means God can heal me. I see. I'm fine. I'm perfect. Everything's great. I don't have any problems. I'm good. God's good. We're good. Well, you're blind. You can't see it. You need God. You need contrition. My friends, it is beautiful how the Lord calls us to faith. It is beautiful how the Lord calls us through faith, even through persecution. And while I would never wish persecution upon any of you, I know that it will be yours. And I can preach that confidently because I also know that Jesus will be with you through it. He will grow your faith. And through that growth in faith, you will encounter him and he will save you.